Hollywood is often constructed as a glamorous dream, where love and fame coexist beneath the stage lights. But behind that illusion are locked rooms, arguments without witnesses, and deaths labeled as accidents far too quickly. The ones who die lose any chance to tell the truth, while those left behind continue living and remain protected. This list is not about people who were convicted. It is about stars whose circumstances, motives, conflicting testimonies, and circumstantial evidence all point toward them. They are often the last person with the victim and the one who controls the narrative afterward. Some were acquitted despite public doubt. Some never faced trial at all. And some cases were closed with the words accident or suicide. The question is not whether they were involved, but why they remain free when the person beside them is dead. If any detail in these stories makes you doubt that it was merely an accident, leave your thoughts in the comments below. 1. O.J. Simpson, Bloodstained Hands and The Glove That Never Fit. Justice may be blind, but in Hollywood, justice is sometimes nothing more than a perfectly staged performance. On the night of June 12, 1994, in the affluent neighborhood of Brentwood, Los Angeles, a horrific scene shook the United States to its core. Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found brutally murdered, their bodies bearing signs of savage violence. The number one suspect was none other than a national hero football legend, O.J. Simpson. Before the tragedy, the relationship between O.J. and Nicole was a long chain of darkness, hidden beneath a glamorous exterior. Nicole endured obsessive control and pathological jealousy from her famous husband. Police records document numerous desperate emergency calls in which she expressed fear that O.J.'s extremism would eventually cost her life. At the crime scene, detectives uncovered a treasure trove of evidence pointing toward O.J. blood, bearing his DNA trailed from the victims' bodies all the way to his bedroom, and a glove covered in biological evidence was found directly on Simpson's property. Even the rare size 12 shoes that left bloody footprints at the scene matched a pair owned by O.J. But before his arrest, O.J. gave the media an unforgettable spectacle: the white Ford Bronco chase broadcast live to 95 million viewers. It did not look like the behavior of an innocent man, but rather the desperation of someone who knew he had crossed a line. When the trial began in 1995, instead of confronting cold forensic science, O.J.'s dream team of attorneys executed a dramatic shift, transforming the courtroom into a battlefield of race and politics. The New York Times called it the trial of the century, where the boundary between truth and theater dissolved amid arguments focused on police misconduct. The moment O.J. struggled to put on the blood-stained glove and it appeared not to fit became a symbol of legal failure immortalized by Johnny Cochran's infamous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." After 11 months of proceedings, the jury needed less than 4 hours to deliver a verdict of not guilty, leaving America stunned. Nicole lay forever in the ground while O.J. walked out of court to cheers from part of the public. Although a civil court later ruled in 1997 that he was responsible and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages criminally, he remained a free man. O.J. even provoked outrage by publishing a book titled "If I Did It," a public taunt aimed straight at the justice system. His story exposed a brutal truth: when you have enough money, fame, and power, even the clearest evidence can be washed clean beneath the stage lights. As we temporarily close the deafening spectacle of the O.J. Simpson case, we turn to a far quieter and darker mystery: the death of the swan Natalie Wood on a yacht drifting through icy waters where her husband Robert Wagner lived on for half a century, while the bruises on her body were never fully explained. 2. Robert Wagner, a wife. Dead in the water and too many things that don't add up. If O.J. Simpson's case was a loud daytime drama, Robert Wagner's story resembles a shadowy noir film where truth sinks to the ocean floor, along with the sound of waves. On Thanksgiving night in 1981, a yacht named Splendor, anchored off Catalina Island, became the stage for one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries: the death of Natalie Wood. The next morning, she was found floating in the sea, wearing a thin nightgown and a red jacket, a painful contrast to her glamorous screen image. The marriage between Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood was praised as eternal love, but in reality it was plagued by violent jealousy. That night, actor Christopher Walken was also on board, widely believed to have ignited Wagner's rage. Witnesses from nearby boats and Captain Dennis Davern later revealed heated arguments, shattering glass, and vicious insults coming from the Wagner cabin. When Natalie disappeared into the freezing darkness, Robert Wagner, the last person with her, waited for hours before calling for help, a calculated delay that remains unexplained. What enraged the public for decades were the bruises on Natalie's body. Forensic experts later stated they did not resemble injuries from a simple fall, but signs of a struggle before she entered the water. Yet with his Hollywood influence, Wagner skillfully steered public perception, and the case was quickly closed as an accidental drowning. It was not until 2011, when the case was reopened and Wagner labeled a person of interest, that the public realized a disturbing truth. A man could live half a century in continued fame, while the truth about his wife's death remained buried beneath contradictory statements. Robert Wagner never stood trial. He chose to age in silence, leaving Natalie Wood to rest beneath the waves with questions that may never be answered. But if Robert Wagner used silence to bury the past, the next man ruled through madness and guns until a single gunshot echoed through an isolated mansion. 3. Phil Spector, a familiar gun and a shot in an empty foyer. A musical genius found the perfect wall of sound in the gunshot echoing through his lonely mansion. Before the 2003 killing, Phil Spector was famous, not only for inventing the revolutionary wall of sound, but also for a darker obsession using guns to intimidate women during private parties at his castle-like estate. This time, the victim was Lana Clarkson, a beautiful actress struggling to reclaim her career. After meeting Spector at the club where she worked, she agreed to return to his home. It was a fatal decision. Hours later, a gunshot tore through the silent foyer. Lana was found dead in a chair while Spector emerged with blood on his hands and uttered words that chilled his driver. "I think I just shot someone." Police found the gun at the victim's feet, but forensic evidence regarding bullet trajectory and wounds directly contradicted Spector's later claim that it was an accidental suicide. Still, with immense wealth and power, Spector turned the investigation into a legal war that dragged on for 6 long years. In the first trial, his fame and a razor-sharp legal team helped him slip away, as the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict. At the time, the media was flooded with images of Spector showing up in bizarre wigs, turning the victim's family's pain into a grotesque black comedy. It wasn't until the second trial in 2009, when old witnesses, including women who once had a gun pressed to their heads by him, finally found the courage to testify that justice truly dared to say the kingmaker's name. Phil Spector eventually paid a price behind bars, but the question still burns: if he hadn't been a rich and famous millionaire, could he have lounged in freedom for so long, using money to stall the truth? A life was taken, and it took nearly a decade before the world accepted that musical genius is not a passport for crime. Phil Spector's power could buy time, but for the next star it was his family protection and a perfectly rehearsed self-defense script that turned what looked like an obvious killing into a case with no one truly held accountable. 4. Lana Turner, a body in the bedroom and a script that saved a career. In Hollywood, people don't just act on screen. Sometimes they act over a lover's corpse to protect their own halo. Lana Turner, the seduction icon of the 1950s, took performance to a new level on a night in April 1958. When her violent lover Johnny Stompanato was found dead in Lana's bedroom with a single fatal stab wound, the world didn't get the criminal earthquake it expected. Instead, it watched a tear-soaked family drama already written in advance. Her 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, was the one who held the knife to protect her mother. Lana and Johnny's relationship had always been a toxic contract filled with beatings, threats, and fear. But on that fateful night when the arguing stopped and a man lay dead, Lana Turner faced a ruthless choice prison and a buried career, or turning her underage child into a legal shield. With the instincts of a star trained in crisis control, Lana understood the system would never punish a child too harshly for defending her mother. The press chased the case like a blockbuster. Lana Turner appeared in court looking fragile, yet strangely commanding, delivering a trembling, tearful monologue about motherhood and the suffering of an abused woman. Contradictions at the scene, like how a 14-year-old girl could produce a wound requiring the force of an adult, were eclipsed by Lana's celebrity gravity. Tabloids rapidly shifted the narrative from possible murder to praise for the daughter's bravery and the tragic fate of the famous mother. The outcome was a ruling of justifiable homicide. No one went to prison. No one bore legal responsibility for Johnny Stompanato's death. Lana Turner walked out of court, and not long after she scored a massive comeback with Imitation of Life, a title almost cruelly ironic for her real story. A man was dead. The truth was buried beneath the heels of fame, and Lana proved something Hollywood hates to admit. In its power game, sometimes a lover's blood is only a small stain on a red carpet dress washed away with a script emotional enough to make the world look the other way. Lana Turner used her daughter as a shield to protect her name. But decades earlier, another king of comedy discovered that even if you're declared innocent in a locked room, the scent of truth can still suffocate an empire. 5. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, A Locked Door and The Truth Crushed Under the Weight of Fame. There are Hollywood parties where the price isn't money, it's a human life traded for the silence of powerful men. In 1921, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was the first million-dollar star comedy royalty with near limitless power. And then it all collapsed inside a locked hotel room in San Francisco, where Virginia Rappe, a young actress with real promise, walked in and never walked out with her breath intact. While music and bootleg liquor spun outside, something horrific played out inside room 1219, something only Arbuckle truly controlled. When Virginia was found in agonizing pain, people quickly recorded her faint, dying words. "He did it to me." But instead of urgent medical intervention, Arbuckle and his entourage chose delay staging and damage control, trying to turn a brutal assault into alcohol poisoning, or a victim's pre-existing condition. The cover-up grew shameless as key witnesses suddenly changed their stories, or disappeared in ways that felt far too convenient under pressure from an industry protecting its golden goose. The press, fueled by media titan William Randolph Hearst, turned the case into a blood-soaked spectacle for profit. Yet in doing so, it also helped Arbuckle exploit the cracks in the justice system. Even as forensic reports indicated Virginia's bladder had ruptured from an extremely violent force, something no natural illness could explain, Arbuckle's lawyers succeeded in turning hard facts into manufactured ambiguity. 3 trials later, the jury issued a rare apology to Arbuckle, but that acquittal existed only on paper. Whatever truly happened behind that locked door was strangled by power and blood money. Virginia Rappe died in pain and humiliation, while Arbuckle, though legally cleared, became a symbol of a rotten era where fame could crush justice under its own weight. A human life was pulverized beneath the body and power of a giant, and Hollywood washed its hands with complicit silence. If Fatty Arbuckle used influence to suffocate the truth in a hotel room, the next man turned his wife's death into the reckless game of an addict, then casually called it literary inspiration. 6. William S. Burroughs. One shot, one joke, and a perfect escape. In the world of rebels, William S. Burroughs is worshipped as a literary monument, but through a legal lens, he was a man who used madness as cover to take a young wife's life. One late afternoon in 1951 in Mexico City, inside an apartment thick with alcohol and drugs, a deadly script was staged not on paper, but with a real gun. Burroughs, in a sick burst of impulse, proposed that his wife Joan Vollmer play William Tell. a game demanding absolute precision where you shoot a glass balanced on someone's head. But Burroughs was no marksman. The glass remained untouched. The bullet did not. It drove straight into Joan's forehead. And the moment she fell, Burroughs didn't face reality. Like a killer, he began a calculated escape. Exploiting the looseness of Mexico's legal system at the time and the leverage of US dollars, he reframed a killing as an accident. After only a brief detention, he was quickly released on bail, backed by murky money and the intervention of wealthy, well-connected family ties. The most chilling proof of Burroughs' ruthlessness was his quiet departure from Mexico, before the official trial even took place, leaving behind his wife's body and the legal consequences. He returned to the United States as a man who should have been a fugitive, yet was welcomed as an icon of personal freedom. No extradition, no retrial, and not a single day in prison for Joan Vollmer's life. The most infuriating part is what came later. In his memoirs, Burroughs casually admitted that his wife's death was the very inspiration and drive that pushed him into becoming a great writer. He turned Joan's death into an artistic springboard, an acceptable sacrifice for his literary career. The truth was distorted into a mythical tale of a cursed man, when in reality, it was simply a man holding a gun, shooting his wife, and using fame to escape accountability in spectacular fashion. Joan Vollmer died and became a sad minor note in her husband's biography, while the perpetrator calmly climbed to the peak of prestige on the very blood of his former wife. William S. Burroughs transformed his gunshot into a literary legend, but in a different decade, inside a romantic restaurant, a famous actor allegedly staged an even more sophisticated script to send his wife to the grave before she could even finish dessert. Robert Blake. 7. Robert Blake. A romantic dinner that ends with a gunshot in the car. Some Hollywood scripts are so terrible that audiences refuse to believe them. But Robert Blake, the star of the detective series Beretta, turned that kind of script into real life on a night in May 2001. The story began with dinner at the Italian restaurant Vitello's, where Blake and his wife Bonnie Lee Backley had just finished their last meal together. Only minutes after leaving, Bonnie was found dead in the passenger seat of their Dodge Stealth, riddled with fatal gunshots, while Blake calmly insisted he was innocent because he had been busy going back to the restaurant to retrieve a gun he had forgotten. The truth began to crack open from that absurd, forgotten gun excuse, alone. In the world of crime hunters and forensic reality, the idea that a man with a long history of vicious resentment toward his wife would accidentally leave her alone in the car at the exact moment a killer appears is a coincidence that feels far too convenient. Detectives quickly discovered that their marriage was essentially a war zone, and Blake constantly tried to rid himself of the wife he claimed was a gold digger. Even more shocking, several witnesses, former stuntmen, bravely came forward with a chilling allegation. Blake had approached them with a cold-blooded offer to take care of his wife for a generous price. The peak of shamelessness was the way Blake weaponized his acting skills in front of television cameras. He appeared frail and devastated, spilling dramatic tears to deceive public opinion, transforming himself from the #1 suspect into a tragic, pitiful widower. At the 2005 criminal trial, despite a mountain of motive-based evidence and explosive testimonies, Blake's legal team squeezed through a narrow legal gap by arguing that there was no direct physical evidence linking a gun in his hands to Bonnie's death. However, Blake's mask completely collapsed in the civil trial that followed. The civil jury, with sharper eyes and a lower tolerance for theatrics, tore through the performance and declared Blake liable for his wife's death, ordering him to pay $30 million in damages. Blake dodged prison time, but he never dodged the truth. He spent the rest of his life under public contempt, a living reminder of this brutal lesson. You can act flawlessly in court, but you can never wash away a crime that has been carved into your conscience and into the very absurd contradictions you created yourself. Robert Blake's performance unraveled under the sheer illogic of his story. But for the next woman, protection came from the justice system itself when it allowed a direct gunshot to be repackaged as an unbelievable accident just to shield a beauty icon, Claudine Longet. 8. Claudine Longet, a shot called an accident and a ridiculous sentence. Sometimes all you need to escape murder is a pretty face and a fake clumsiness script polished with lies. Claudine Longet, the captivating French singer and actress, proved that in 1976 in Aspen, Colorado. The victim was Spider Sabish, a celebrated ski champion, and also her lover. When their relationship cracked and Sabish demanded that she leave his home, Claudine's response wasn't a suitcase. It was a point-blank gunshot inside the bathroom. The supposed accident collapsed under the logic of the crime scene. Claudine claimed the gun went off by itself while she was holding it for Sabish to teach her how to use it. But forensic reports told a completely different story. The bullet entered Sabish's body while he was turned away from her, an angle that didn't match any training moment and didn't match any sudden accident. Even worse, Claudine's personal diary filled with jealousy spirals and resentment toward Sabish pointed to a clear motive, not random misfortune. The outrage reached its peak when the justice system seemed to lean toward the celebrity. Due to stupid procedural mistakes in evidence collection like taking blood samples and seizing the diary without a warrant, the court threw out some of the most critical evidence. Claudine walked into court not as a perpetrator, but as a panicked woman who had made a mistake. Backed by influence and famous friends, she was convicted only of criminal negligence, a charge so light it felt like an insult to the dead. The final outcome stunned the public. Claudine paid a small fine and received a sentence of 30 days in jail, and she was even allowed to serve it on weekends at a time she personally chose, so it wouldn't disrupt her private life. The truth was warped. The champion Sabish's dignity was buried, and Claudine walked out as if she had just finished a short vacation. It was a cold demonstration of the same sick reality in a celebrity world. If you are pretty enough and your lawyers are clever enough, a human life can be reduced to a few weekends of inconvenience. Claudine Longet used fake clumsiness to slip through the law, but in a grim hotel room in New York, a punk icon chose a different strategy. Total silence in the face of his girlfriend's death, then took the truth to the grave in the most extreme way possible. 9. Sid Vicious. The knife. The locked room and the confession that got taken back. Some deaths are written in advance in blood and fresh cuts, but when it finally happens, the one closest to the body suddenly pretends to forget everything. On the morning of October 12, 1978, at the legendary Chelsea Hotel, Nancy Spungen's body was found beneath the bathroom sink with a single stab wound to the abdomen. Standing near the corpse, blank-eyed, drug-soaked, and shaking, was Sid Vicious, the symbol of the Sex Pistols. Sid's guilt seemed to surface immediately in his own contradictory first words. When police arrived, Sid reportedly blurted out, "I did it, because I'm a dirty dog." But the moment lawyers and a record label eager to protect a money-printing asset stepped in, the confession was pulled back and replaced with a new script. An intruder broke into the room. Yet the evidence pointed back in a straight line. The murder weapon was a Jaguar hunting knife purchased by Sid only days earlier, and it carried the violent residue of a struggle between the two of them. The shamelessness didn't stop there. Despite the room being essentially sealed, no credible signs of a third person, media and fans still tried to paint Sid as a tragic lover, a victim of romance turned fatal. They ignored the reality that Sid had a history of extreme violence, and Nancy had lived in intense fear for months leading up to her death. Instead of being treated like a dangerous suspect, Sid was released on bail with massive money from management, and he went right back to partying and using drugs as if nothing had happened. The case never reached a final verdict because Sid Vicious died from an overdose before trial. But the way the file was effectively closed after the suspect's death became its own insult to the victim. The truth was buried beneath punk mythology and rebel culture, yet the evidence at the Chelsea Hotel remains a blunt accusation. Nancy did not die because of a mysterious intruder. She died because a system chose a star's reputation over a human life. Sid Vicious took the truth down to the grave to dodge justice. But the next figure on this list had something stronger than silence. a legendary last name that worked like body armor, turning a gunshot inside a mansion into a money and power negotiation. Christian Brando. 10. Christian Brando, a family gunshot under the shadow of the Godfather. Some last names are so powerful they can turn a blazing gun barrel into a pitiful accident. On a night in May 1990, inside Marlon Brando's luxury Beverly Hills estate, a sharp gunshot ended the life of Doug Drolle, the boyfriend of Christian Brando's sister. Instead of becoming a serious crime scene, the mansion rapidly turned into a stage where the full weight of The Godfather was deployed to shield a guilty son. Christian's crime began to unravel through the absurd accidental gun grab script he and his lawyers carefully built. Christian claimed he only wanted to scare Doug because Doug had abused his sister and that the gun went off during a struggle. But forensic findings threw cold water on that story. Doug Drolle was shot from behind the head while he was sitting on the sofa still holding a TV remote and a lighter. This wasn't a brawl. This was an execution shot from behind when the victim was completely off guard. The shamelessness of the case was in how the Brando family manipulated the justice system with money and influence. Marlon Brando turned the courtroom into a masterclass performance, crying, blaming himself for his parenting, pulling focus away from the brutal truth of a killing. Under media pressure and the most expensive lawyers Hollywood could buy, Christian's charge was reduced from murder to voluntary manslaughter. Instead of a life sentence for shooting a man in the back of the head, Christian Brando received a short prison term and was released early for good behavior. Doug Drolle's death was shrunk into a family tragedy, an impulsive mistake of youth. The truth of that cowardly shot was buried under Marlon Brando's enormous shadow, proving a rotten rule of Hollywood: when your father is a legend, even blood on your hands can be washed away with theatrical tears and a convenient plea deal. Christian Brando used his father's name to escape a harsher reckoning, but the next man was a true tyrant who turned music into his wife's screams until the truth became impossible to hide. The so-called King of Western Swing, Spade Cooley. 11. Spade Cooley. Domestic violence. Ends, but justice stops halfway. Behind the cheerful rhythms of Western swing, there was a buried scream, a woman who paid with her life for trying to escape a marriage from hell. Spade Cooley, crowned the king of Western swing, didn't just build a music empire, he ruled a private kingdom of fear inside his own home. In 1961, the horror finally surfaced when he attacked his wife Ella May in front of their young daughter, a savage assault that dragged on for hours until she stopped breathing. Cooley's brutality wasn't exposed through vague suspicion, but through forensic evidence so gruesome that newspapers at the time used the word barbaric. This wasn't a quick gunshot or a staged accident. Cooley used his bare hands slowly, deliberately, and with chilling clarity. And after it was done, he lit a cigarette and tried to stage a story that she had fallen even as the marks on her body screamed a completely different truth. The real obscenity came after conviction. A Cooley was found guilty of first-degree murder, a rare outcome for a celebrity of that era, yet political influence. And his old fame began operating like a rescue machine behind the curtain. Blind fans and powerful connections in California government pushed hard to soften his punishment. The peak of injustice came when the sitting governor signed a commutation that effectively freed Cooley after less than 9 years. The world watched a cold-blooded killer walk out of prison as if he might reclaim his spotlight. But fate delivered its own verdict. Cooley collapsed and died of a heart attack shortly after a comeback event celebrating his freedom. He never truly repented, and he never paid the full debt for Ella May's life. But the mask was permanently ripped away. A great career was reduced to ashes beside the indictment of a tyrant who used power to grind justice down to the very end. Spade Cooley paid with death the moment he touched freedom, but the next actor received a bizarre kind of Hollywood forgiveness. After a short stretch behind bars, he was welcomed back to the red carpet, while his victim was erased from public memory. Paul Kelly. 12. Paul Kelly, a jealous punch and a death that got erased. Some killers don't need guns or knives. They use their bare hands, then use fame to bleach their conscience in public. Paul Kelly was a rising star on Broadway and in Hollywood until his violent nature surfaced through a bloody love triangle. In 1927, Kelly's obsessive jealousy led to a brutal confrontation with Ray Raymond, the husband of the woman Kelly was secretly involved with. Kelly's crime didn't unfold through a clever script, but through direct, savage violence. He broke into Raymond's home and beat him so severely that Raymond died days later from a traumatic head injury. Instead of remorse, Kelly and his lover, the victim's wife, attempted a cover story claiming it was merely a fair argument and that Raymond died from unrelated health issues. But witnesses and the autopsy exposed the cold truth. This was a targeted attack meant to remove a romantic obstacle. The ultimate outrage was how Hollywood welcomed the killer back. Even after being convicted of manslaughter, Kelly served only 25 months, helped by the influence of major studios. Then, the moment he stepped outside prison, he wasn't blacklisted. He was embraced as a misguided hero. Kelly went on to appear in over 100 films, earning applause and even prestigious recognition. Ray Raymond's death was pushed into oblivion, as if a human life mattered less than box office revenue. The truth of that fatal beating was buried under time and red carpet glare. Paul Kelly proved a vicious reality in Hollywood. Sometimes prison is treated like a brief break, and afterward you can return to playing righteous heroes on screen, standing on the corpse of the person you helped destroy. Paul Kelly used performance to blur the stain of killing, but the next star relied on an even more insulting lie, a ridiculous cleaning. A gun statement that turned a shot to the back of the head into an accident no one wanted to believe. Tom Neal. 13. Tom Neal, a shot from behind and a convenient lie. On screen, Tom Neal often played men pushed to the edge. In real life, he was the one who pushed his wife to death. In 1965, the star of Detour turned his life into a noir nightmare when his third wife, Gail Bennett, was found dead from a gunshot inside their home. Neal didn't run. He stayed and chose to deliver a story so absurd, even a rookie detective would flinch. The crime began to betray itself through one detail: Gail was shot from the back of the head. Yet Neal told police it was an accident that happened while he was cleaning a gun and it went off. The audacity was almost insulting. Neal was an amateur boxer with a notorious history of violence. He had once badly beaten a fellow actor out of jealousy. A man deeply familiar with weapons and brutality does not accidentally fire into his wife's head from behind. Even though prosecutors pointed to evidence of intense fighting in the days leading up to the death, Neal's status as an old Hollywood name helped soften the blow. He was charged with manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. He served a short sentence and walked free in his early 50s. A life was stolen in the most cowardly way. Yet all Neal truly paid was a few years of freedom and a career that had already faded. That shot from behind remains a stain no cleaning a gun script can ever scrub away. Tom Neal's cleaning the gun story may be peak shamelessness, but in the shadows of 1930s Hollywood, there was an even more calculating killer. He didn't need a weapon. Only coldness locking the woman he once loved inside a deadly gas trap, then sleeping peacefully in the room above. Roland West. 14. Roland West, A Locked Door and The Silence of the Man Upstairs. Some murders don't require a weapon. They only require cold indifference and a door locked tight. The death of Thelma Todd, the beloved queen of comedy in 1935, remains one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries. One in which director Roland West played the central role in a murder script without a single gunshot. Thelma was found dead from carbon monoxide poisoning inside her luxury car in the garage, yet the scene showed clear signs of a violent assault. The truth begins to surface through West's controlling relationship with Thelma. That night, after a fierce argument, West locked the exterior door, trapping her in the freezing cold and forcing her to seek shelter inside the garage. West's cruelty lies in one chilling fact: he lived directly above that garage, yet later claimed he heard nothing and remembered nothing. No cries for help, no engine running through the night. The outrage peaked when the investigation itself was quietly manipulated by Hollywood's unseen power brokers. Evidence of bruises on Thelma's face and fractured ribs was inexplicably ignored, allowing the case to be closed swiftly as a suicide. Roland West never stood trial. He lived a life of wealth and comfort until decades later, when he allegedly confessed the truth on his deathbed. A convenient death removed a lover who wanted to leave him, and Hollywood became complicit by burying the truth alongside Thelma Todd's beauty beneath a grave of silence. Roland West carried the secret of Thelma Todd's death to the grave, turning it into a haunting legend. But the final case on this list is even more shocking, when even the strongest man in the world fell to a mysterious gunshot, and an entire power structure joined forces to clean up the truth in order to protect the ghost behind the curtain. George Reeves. 15. George Reeves, The Death of Superman and A Truth Wiped Clean. Even Superman couldn't survive the gun of Hollywood power, especially when his death was the key to protecting those at the top. In 1959, the world was stunned when George Reeves, the actor who played Superman, died from a gunshot wound in his bedroom. While guests downstairs were still partying, the Man of Steel lay dead, and one of the most brazen crime scene stagings in Hollywood history began. The cover-up reveals itself through details police conveniently ignored. The murder weapon carried no fingerprints belonging to Reeves, and shell casings were found in positions inconsistent with suicide. Even more suspicious, those inside the house delayed calling the police for hours. Ample time for a thorough cleanup. At the time of his death, Reeves was entangled in a dangerous romantic relationship with the wife of a powerful MGM executive. Someone with enough influence to turn a murder into a suicide with a single phone call. The truth was twisted as the press quickly pushed a narrative of a depressed actor whose career was supposedly collapsing, despite the fact that Reeves had just signed contracts for major upcoming projects. There was no reinvestigation, no serious forensic review. Witness testimonies contradicted each other and were discarded. George Reeves died twice, once from the bullet and once from the collective silence of a justice system for sale. Superman could fly on screen, but in real life, he was nothing more than a disposable pawn used to protect the secrets of Hollywood's true gods. 15 stars. 15 deaths. Dozens of lives destroyed. And yet what remains are not righteous verdicts, but shadows. Behind Hollywood's glittering red carpets lie deep, unlit corridors where justice is sometimes nothing more than a commodity, bought with money, fame, and perfectly staged narratives. Victims like Nicole Simpson, Natalie Wood, and George Reeves may have taken the truth to silent graves, but the questions of responsibility and morality will forever haunt film history. In the power games of celebrity culture, death is often treated as a PR crisis to be managed, and truth, no matter how brutal, can always be rewritten to protect the gods on screen. Which of these 15 cases feels the most unjust to you? Leave your thoughts in the comments so we can discuss together. If this story sent chills down your spine about the dark side of fame, don't forget to like and subscribe to support more deep investigations like this. Thank you for watching. See you next time.